Joss Whedon. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, he's gay, right?
I actually have no idea about his, I don't know enough about the guy.
I heard somewhere that he was, and it got me thinking.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Should we keep, because Joel Schumacher fucked up Batman.
If you're trying to say that gay people shouldn't be allowed to be directors,
no. But maybe not superhero movies. I'm just saying, 2 for 2, you lost? Maybe. I'm just saying people need to think about it.
I think that the problem stems more from...
Listen, if we need to have a law that homosexuals cannot direct superhero movies to save my movies, I think that that's a little bit of intolerance that community can take on the head at this point.
Our creative juices flow the hardest when we think about your mom. This is the New World Order broadcast, coming to you live from the end of the world.
That's right, this is the New World Order. I am your host, the Hatman, and this is your other host, Talking Head number 5. We are members of the New World Order. We are everything that is wrong with your society. We are corrupting your children, bringing down your faith in patriotism and corporations. Has nothing to do with the malfeasance of these organizations. We are doing it on purpose. You are welcome. Because we have an idea for a New World Order, but we cannot implement this idea until the old world crumbles. It has outworn its usefulness, and we must destroy it utterly. Let not one brick be laid upon another, and then we shall begin.
And like a phoenix from shitty ashes,
but
shall rise again.
I don't know what you've been what you've been doing for the last few weeks, but yeah, I put that one brick, not one brick laid upon another thing. I put it on pause for a while because you got me Tears of the Kingdom for my birthday.
Indeed I did.
So my bunker buddy is aware. I spend about 5 or 6 hours a day doing New World Order work. And then I spend the next 16 hours playing Tears of the Kingdom because
I feel like that's fair. It's a lot of content.
I don't sleep, so gotta do something.
Yeah, the not sleeping thing definitely makes you have to find ways to fill up your time.
I'm gonna try to get back to destroying the world more actively. It's just that's a really good game.
It's I have not played it as much as you, just because I have not had the time.
Right.
But no, yeah, I mean, from what I've messed around with so far, definitely a lot of, like, I thought that Breath of the Wild was impressive, and this has actually, like, I'm surprised that they were able to do even more with it.
I was really worried because when you got me Breath of the Wild, I went into a hole for 6 months.
Zelda coma.
And it looks like this one may end up being 18. It's that much better. I mean, I didn't think that they could make that game. Really, I mean, you can make it better. You're going to have iterations, of course.
Well, sure.
Like, let's say every time you do something like that, it's going to be 10% better. Or it's like 150% better than the first one. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's almost like having created the massive world and systems that they made for the first one. They're like, okay, we've got all that built, and they were like, now let's really fuck with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they didn't reinvent the wheel. They kept everything from Breath of the Wild, but they just made it so much more dynamic as far as gameplay, storyline. I do have a couple complaints.
Oh, okay, good.
Have you had any characters put into your database yet where you meet a new character? And
No, I don't think I have. I'm very, very short into... Oh, you mean like when you're talking to people like Pura or whatever her name
yeah,
is.
so it takes a character and it, like, your database has been...
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some characters that just aren't as charming as the programmers thought they were. And then, so I'm having this conversation with this 11-year-old kid that looks like a bird. And he's boring the shit out of me. And it's just trope after trope after trope. Dad doesn't think I'm old enough to do this, but I know how to do that. And then at the end, it's like, oh, he learned, Link. Thank you so much for teaching. And it's it's like sitcom level, like bullshit. And then like when it like he does a little pose, he's been added to your database, like little Johnny or whatever the fuck. And he pauses. I'm like, oh, I hate him so much already.
I detest this character.
And spoiler alert, he's one of the sages. So he can stay with you and fight with you. And at that point, I have no idea how that mechanic works throughout the rest of the game. And I hate this motherfucker so much.
Oh, gotcha.
And I want him erased from my database. And then they're like, he's going to be with you and fight alongside you. I was like, no. Tell me they're not doing a Navi thing again. Oh, he's worse than Navi because he thinks he's cute. Oh, no. You can't do this to me.
At least Navi knew she was annoying.
Yeah, she was like trying to be annoying.
Hey!
And thankfully, this kid, he doesn't have to be there. And he doesn't talk throughout the rest of the game.
Well, that's a plus at least because, yeah, Navi got a bit much. It's like, I understand that, like, when they sat there and they made Ocarina of Time, which Navi is from, obviously, it was, I mean, when you think about the ground that game broke, like that was early days of 3D. They were taking a two-dimensional, overhead view game and turning it into a 3D game and trying to figure out, well, how the F do you make the combat work in this? Sure. And they came up with the Z targeting system, which was brilliant. Nintendo invented that. And like almost every 3D third-person game has used some iteration of what Nintendo came up with the targeting system.
Makes sense.
Nintendo's big flaw was that they wanted an in-universe reason for that targeting system to exist.
No.
And that's why they made Navi, is because if you notice, whenever you're Z-targeting anything in Ocarina of Time, she flies over to it and is flying around
See, they just overthought it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like if I want to focus on something in the real world, I just choose to focus on it.
No, I throw a child at it and have it crawl all over them so that I can pay attention.
And it keeps screaming at you, hey, look at me! Hey, look at me!
Exactly. That's the only way that I can maintain any kind of eye contact with people.
It's the only way you can maintain focus on anything.
It's either that or they're like a tree to me. Like, if I don't have a screaming child crawling around their head... Like, it's like looking at a wall.
Wow. So that's why I have to give you, like, fucking Adderall every time we do this? So
then that's why I'm always borrowing people's children, and they get very angry about the throwing. I don't know what it is.
All right. Fair enough. But, I mean, the amount of work that must have went into this world, I mean, it's amazing. How do you know any stats on how big this map is? Like, is it comparable... Like with real dimensions, is it comparable to like a small city? I mean,
ooh, that's probably
huge.
Something we could Google. I'm sure people have like, yeah. Now you got me curious. Here, hold up.
I want to know like how much information. I mean, the chip is like as big as my thumbnail, and there's so much to explore. It's got to be the size of like a town, a small city. You know what I mean? I mean, as far as like virtually how many miles is actually covered?
Yeah. Here, I'm gonna find out. Let's see.
Oh, they're just giving you like the bytes.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking for the size. Like in the real world. Okay, so it would be in the real world.
Yeah.
Hold up. Let me get this on the screen for anybody who's watching. Would be 168 miles long and 198 miles wide.
33,268 square miles.
That's insane, dude.
86,163 square kilometers. So, I mean, this is like, that's got to be a small city, right?
I'm assuming.
It's not New York, but I mean, that's got to be like Philadelphia.
Oh, I don't know, because 168 by 198, that might be bigger than New York, because New York's mostly population density.
I don't know. Look up how many square miles New York City is. And then you have to think, how big of a team programmed this? This must have been self-generating at one point.
New York City is only 469 square miles.
And what was Tears of the Kingdom? 163?
Hold up. No, it was 33,000 square miles.
Oh my God.
It's way bigger than New York City.
By like many, many times?
Yeah. That's what it's looking like if those numbers are correct.
Then how can I run across it in 8 hours?
You can run across New York City in 8 hours.
No, but with 33,000 miles, what is 168 miles long?
On foot? You know what? Here's my caveat to this. They might be talking about all 3 layers of it, since there's the sky, the depths, and the overworld.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I'm sure they are.
You would probably have to cut that into thirds, so it's probably about 10,000 square miles, which would be about twice the size of New York City.
Yeah, it's still 10,000 square miles. I'm not running across that in 8 hours in real life, even at top speeds. So,
well, but that's square miles. It's only 168 miles long.
Space in the game is truncated in a weird way, and you can tell that when you're playing. Like, when you're falling, they do a bunch of animation stuff to make you feel like you're falling fast. You're not falling that fast.
Oh, sure,
it's taking its time.
Yeah, you're not really in free fall. They're doing a lot of industrial light and magic to make you feel like
it's moving real fast. You're falling real fast. Yeah. So I think that they're doing some magic with the space as well, because I mean, you could, I'm sure, 8 hours real time run across that map. It'd take you a long time, and you're going to hit mountains and shit, but let's say there's no mountains there, and you're just like, do with your finger on the button. I mean, you could run across it. It can't be 10,000 miles.
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, I don't know if that's a reputable thing, or,
Yeah, I don't know, man. But it's huge. It's amazing.
Either way, it's massive. But if those numbers are correct, that's crazy.
It's amazing that they pack that much information, that little chip. I mean, the way that they're programming it nowadays is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, no, yeah. And that's the whole big thing to me about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, as far as that stuff goes, is just the depth of how well they programmed those physics engines and everything. And the chemistry of the game, like the way that things will interact with each other, how fire will spread and stuff like that, and the way that things will roll down hills, the way they have like gravity,
the way you roll down a hill when somebody hits you in the head really hard.
Oh yeah, if you need to take your little tumble off a cliff,
Link kind of gets ragdolled.
Yeah. But yeah, originally when they were making Breath of the Wild, I know that they made a different version of the original Legend of Zelda for the NES, and they sat there, and that's how they did like primary like sandbox kind of tests for their systems and everything.
Yeah, you told me they started with the architecture, the very first one.
Yeah. So and then they started adding the stuff like fire spreading and things like that, or being able to chop down trees, and like you can actually find like little videos online of like them dicking around with it. Like from when they did like a developmental documentary about like the making of.
Oh, I would love to watch that.
Yeah, it's really funny to see like the old Zelda that you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
But he's got the instead of the green tunic that he had in the game, he's got like that blue tunic that he has in the new game, but that's the only difference. Otherwise it looks like the 87? I
think so. Something like that.
Legend of Zelda game.
Well, you turned me on to that South Park documentary, 6 Days or whatever.
6 Days to Air, yeah.
6 Days to Air, and I was like, yeah, but I'm not really interested in it. And like, wow, that was a great documentary. It's
fascinating to find out how these things get made.
It really is fascinating to see hardworking, creative people at work. When most people think of creatives, it's somebody who's dicking around, works a job that they hate, starving artist,
works at Starbucks, brings a guitar to parties.
Gets laid a lot, does a lot of drugs. But
always playing the first 3 minutes of like Stairway to Heaven.
The South Park guys, I mean, they're like busting their asses. They don't even like, they're just walking into the office at all hours with McDonald's, like, Jesus Christ. And 6 days to create an entire episode, and that's why they're so on point and they're so topical.
Yeah, it's a large reason why their social acuity is so high with their episodes. It's like they're never talking about something that's old news.
Right. I mean, you look at what we do, we're not animating shit, and we're always weeks behind.
Oh, yeah, but I mean...
I don't think we put anything up on our channel for the last 2 weeks.
That's probably accurate.
But then you look at that, and you think about the people, all the work that must have went into a game as massive as the last 2 Zelda games. And I mean... It's fascinating to watch creative people and how they have to have that sort of balance between play and really hard work. Like the play, like you know, when they're having like the writers' room meeting in 6 days to air, they're just like making each other crack up. That's all it is.
Oh yeah, and that's the entire point. Is, ooh, that's good. Let's keep that. Or oh my god, that's fucking hilarious. Or ooh, what if this? You know, it's just that's all the ideas guy stuff. But then you've got to have the rubber meet the road after that.
Yeah, and then like, you know, slowly but surely the chalkboard is filled up. Then they storyboard, and then, you know, it's off to the races.
Yeah.
Nobody's in the fucking writer's room anymore. Everybody's got their own jobs to do to make this fucking thing actually happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty inspiring to see people who are creative full time, and that's, you know, to see how hard they can work when it's something they actually care about. Because I mean,
yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's that grind doesn't feel as grind if it's a passion.
Do you think that's why most people have the stereotype in their mind? Because I was thinking about this the other day of, you know, creative types just being really lazy, or do you think it's because there's something that impedes that type of personality from dedicating a lot of energy to something unless they absolutely are enjoying it, unless it's in their wheelhouse?
I feel like maybe that's a part of it.
'Cause, I mean, most people, I mean, you know, you don't give a shit if you're a general manager for Lexus or if you're a stockbroker. It's just whichever one makes you the most money. You're just there. You know, I don't think people are passionate about most of their jobs.
I think that there's some people who, even in like management positions and things like that, get really into being good at their jobs.
I think most people in middle management, and we may have talked about this, I think what they get really passionate about is having authority over other people and telling them what the fuck to do.
I feel like the way that you can always tell the people who were meant to be in management, the people who are meant to be in charge, are the people who you can tell are getting excited about their own ideas. It's the people who just try to come up with things to make it look like they're doing something.
To validate their job.
Exactly. Like, and it's really easy to differentiate those two types of people if you're around them enough.
Like whoever keeps redesigning iTunes, so every time I open it, it needs like a complete update.
Yeah, just some jackass who's like, well, if we move the buttons over here, I can get another year's salary.
Or Facebook. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like Facebook, I'm looking at it going, this is exactly the same way it was 6 years ago. You motherfuckers are just recycling the design.
Yeah, just shifting it back and forth.
So if somebody's like excited about the ideas that they're coming up with.
Oh yeah, and you'll see that with non-creative types. Like I think, you know, you've seen like Elon Musk get like really into like some of the products that they're rolling out with Tesla and stuff like that. Whether, you know, anybody likes or dislikes Elon Musk, he seems to get excited about what his companies are doing.
You can tell he's extremely enthusiastic about what he's up to. He went on Joe Rogan again recently, I believe. Unless I was looking at the old one. I don't think I was. I think I was looking at a new one. And yeah, you can tell, like, he is massively enthusiastic. I don't think you could run 3 or 4 huge companies without being massively enthusiastic about what they're doing.
Sure, and like I said, I mean, there are people who say that, like, the less time he spends running stuff, the better it is for the companies, because sometimes his enthusiasm is a hindrance to shit actually working. But, you know, I don't know.
Is it?
I've never worked with the guy.
Well, I know, like, if you stall the rocket because you want the head of it to be a different shape because you're trying to make fun of Spaceballs or something.
Yeah. Or, I mean,
you know, and that holds up the rocket on SpaceX, and you have billions of dollars being invested into this company. Okay, fine, but it is funny.
Sure, and I think
and you gotta have fun.
I think that's the reason why a lot of the money people in the companies, like, they really work hard to try to get him to stop a lot of times.
Is that right? I never heard this.
So he's gotten into a lot of clashes from what I've heard with, like, the boards of directors at Tesla and stuff like that. And obviously like Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it, since everybody still calls it Twitter and tweeting, despite the fact that he tried to rebrand it.
Just pick one. I don't give a shit.
But, you know, I mean, first thing he does when he goes in there is, in order to, like, make a meme, he walks in carrying a sink, like, just as, like, you know, like, I forget what it was. It was something about, like, the, you know, everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, he was making fun of a meme, or doing a meme.
He was doing some kind of meme, but it's like, after doing some kind of meme, he walks in and, like, fires half the employees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay. And as a result of that, it's like Twitter, like, started working like absolute dog shit for a few days because the people who kept it running, he just fired 50% of them.
Remember what I said. The illuminated ones have to destroy the old world before we can build back better and make it great again.
But I do think that he's one of those people because he's not really a creative per se.
I would say so. You
I'm
don't
just saying
think
per se.
I mean, he's not just saying, "Hey, what has to be done today?" He's creating things to do. He's saying, "Wouldn't it be good if it went in this direction? How do we get there?"
Well, sure,
A, B, C,
and
then following up on those things. But that didn't exist before he came up with, let's see if we can do that. That's creative.
You can make an argument that he would sit in the same position as, like, a film director or a game director or something like that. He's somebody who's trying to keep a cohesive vision together throughout the group effort, because it's like, that's in the creative sphere. Like, the reason why it's so interesting to see things like how South Park is made, and, like, to see how, like, Breath of the Wild was made or something like that, is because that is...
Yeah, you gotta show me that.
That is hundreds of people who are sitting there and working on something, and they're working on such a small slice of it. And there's gotta be somebody who's looking down on all of that, on what everybody's doing, and seeing
big
the puzzle together.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I mean, that's basically what Steve Jobs did. I mean,
sure, because Steve Jobs...
He hired people that were way more technically advanced than he was. He just had a vision, and he was the glue that held it together.
Yeah, and everybody at this point, I'm sure, knows that Wozniak was the one who was, like, the brains of the company.
But that's that's a highly creative person. You can't say that a person in that role is not highly creative.
Oh, sure. I guess that brings up the question then, like, how do you define that kind of creativity? Because obviously he's making creative decisions and stuff like that, but would you describe him as a creative? Because he's technically in an administrative role.
Well, I would not say that Musk finds himself mostly in an administrative role.
I'm not sure what he does on a daily basis. So.
And he'd be fun to... Maybe there's a documentary on that, like A Day in the Life. Like, Joe Rogan did, like, a little short for somebody. I think it was, like, MTV back in the day or something, like a day. Nah, it couldn't have been MTV. But anyway, like, a day in the life of somebody who has that much going on would be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, because MTV had that show Diary.
No, it wasn't that.
Which they had some interesting episodes, but I mean, that mainly focused on musicians, because that's back when MTV was majority about music. It's like Marilyn Manson did one where, like, they followed him around and crap.
But it would be interesting to have, like, a day in the life of somebody that high powered, like Elon Musk. I mean, I don't think that we can fathom anybody in the world who is as busy as that man, you know?
I think the funny thing is when you get to that level, what they consider, like, work, you know, I work 14 hours a day. It's like, Yeah, but it's not like the way other people who work for 14 hours a day
it's not
work.
mining coal or changing oil on cars for 14 hours a day. But I mean, when you're that enthusiastic about what you do, I mean, you kind of find yourself thinking about it all the time. So
sure, it dominates your thoughts.
I'll give you a really good example.
They consider themselves working all day,
exactly,
because they're always
thinking
about it.
is work. It burns calories. It uses energy. I mean, we've proven that.
Sure.
The fucking professional chess players who go tournaments, like the real ones, the real people. I mean, they're eating 12,000 calories a day, and most of them are skinny as hell. They're burning all of that, all those calories just using their brains.
I know what you meant, but you said 12,000 calories. That's like less than what a normal human is supposed to consume. It's a 2,000 calorie a day diet.
Yeah, 12,000 is more.
I thought you
2,000.
said 1,200. I'm sorry. My bad.
I said 1,000.
Okay.
Pretty sure. 12,000 calories a day, you know, they're burning it up just sitting in a chair. So, I mean, we know, that is work. Just because your body's not moving, you know, you're not getting your hands dirty. So, for example, let me give you a really good example. I decided, because it is kind of my modus operandi, to do things when it's way too late to be ahead of the curve. So I waited until podcasts were all done and way super saturated, and then I was like, that looks like fun, let's do that. So I had an idea for a little
I've seen so many good ones, I should make one.
Yeah, and it's like well over 1 million, right? It's like it's not gonna happen, dude.
Everybody's got a podcast.
Yeah. And then, so I was like, you know, I kind of want to start an online business. What's kind of like within my wheelhouse that I could do? So I was like, oh, this looks like fun. Print on demand. That's awesome. I was looking at it from like the business angle. You don't have to have a whole lot of capital to get started. Really zero, to be honest with you. And everybody else is taking their cut that's doing the actual physical labor. You just have to come up with ideas. I was like, that's awesome. It's super saturated.
I can make money being the ideas guy?
It's a super saturated market, and it's gotten to the point where it's nearly impossible to get a single sale off of. Let's do that. So the first thing I wanted to do was, and this is to my point, I was watching how other people go ahead and do this. I was doing my due diligence and research, and everybody's just ripping off each other's ideas.
Oh, sure.
So you're going to have like a bucket of ideas, and then you're going to have thousands of people taking the same ideas and doing them in different ways. You know, different graphics, different typeset, different color t-shirts, whatever. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. So what I did was I spent an entire day in my recliner with I had a binaural beats on my earphones, and I had my iPhone with me, and I was just meditating, laying down in my recliner, and then every so often I was just kind of dipping my consciousness down into just where you start to see shit that doesn't make sense, like you're just beginning to dream, you know.
And that Twilight kind of
state. I'd kind of keep myself there without actually falling asleep, and then every so often something would pop in my head. I'd be like, that's a good idea. I wonder if anybody's ever done that.
And I look online and, okay.
Oh, no, I didn't bother to look online. Fuck that shit. I don't want to know.
No, I got it.
So then, I'd sit up in my chair. I'd really excited, get my iPhone, open the notes, and I'd type in that idea for like a t-shirt or something or a poster or whatever.
It makes you wonder how many people have done like "this is fine" with like something terrible happening on a t-shirt or a coffee mug, you know.
Well, you could turn that into such a serial. That's so scalable. We should definitely do that. But I did that, and it felt like, so here was my experience. It felt like maybe 8 hours had passed. I basically did this for almost 24 hours. And by the time I was finished and I looked at the notes on my phone, I had over 75 ideas.
Yeah.
And I ended up using about 60 of them. So they weren't bad.
Sure. No, I got you.
But somebody looking at me from the outside would be like, my God, he's so fucking lazy. He's been sitting with his fucking headphones on, like half asleep for 24 fucking hours.
Yeah, he's just been dozing off in the lazy boy.
When's this guy gonna go get a job? What the fuck is he doing?
For some reason, whenever I know this is completely tangential, but whenever somebody says somebody needs to get a job, it always reminds me of Jim Gaffigan's bit about holidays. So they're like, oh, let's take that tree, bring it in here, we'll take these lights, put them out there. Man, I really need to get a job.
Right. But I mean, you know, you see what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. It's just anytime somebody says that phrase.
So you can't, when somebody says, I work you can work 24 hours a day. If your brain is so geared up, your mind is so geared up and enthusiastic about what your project is, your dream space becomes, athletes experience this. They're playing the game in their sleep because it's like a self-training mode.
Sure. And I would argue that I think that if you look at like blue collar quote unquote musicians like Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, it's like, they were working menial jobs before they made it as musicians and stuff like that. It's like, you can't tell me like the whole time, like if you're working on a loading dock or something, if you're a creative who's stuck doing a job that is that grueling 12-hour a day physical labor, it's like, your mind's probably going the whole time about like, ooh, this would make a good song or that would make a good song, because your brain's not doing anything at that point,
Sure, absolutely. Well, good example of that. I think the wealthiest fine artist today, his name is Damien Hirst. I think he's the wealthiest. He's the most successful. And he talks
or at least at one point he was.
At one point he was.
He still is. Yeah.
Right. There's that other guy who I can never remember his name. He married a porn star.
Isn't that just everybody, though?
Everybody wants to, I guess. So he talks about one day he's working on a construction site. And he sits at a table. It's lunchtime. And this guy next to him goes into his cooler and pulls out a full beef heart.
Okay. Just like a cow's heart, yeah.
Yeah, like cooked, whatever.
Sure.
Bites into the fucking thing like an apple.
That's just mildly disturbing and hilarious.
So Damien is sitting there, is like, and he goes, at that point, I was just like, I have to be an artist. I can't do this. These are not my people. This is not where I belong. And then, it's really funny. Like, he talks about that in interviews. And then, do you know the type of work?
Yeah, I'm familiar
generally
with
that he
Damien
does.
Yeah.
It's like animals split in half. Yeah. In formaldehyde.
He's got like that segmented shark and all of that.
Yeah, he uses animals in formaldehyde like all the time for like most of his work. It's mostly like sculpture, and a lot of it's conceptual and painting.
Sure.
But the stuff that he's best known for is that. It's like, how inspiring was that fucking beef heart? Like, how much of a part did that play? Yeah, exactly.
Whereas most other people, like, if you weren't a creative type and you were sitting there and you were working in that job, you would see somebody pull out a beef heart and bite it into it, and you'd just be like, what is my life?
So let me ask you a question. Why don't we start with this? I mean, as far as creativity goes, let's define it. And then I have a question for you. Like, if you didn't have to do things on a day-to-day basis, like go to a job, or you have like you're friends with like human beings and stuff like that.
I don't think you understand that that's just not the way I operate. Friends? What is this friendship you speak of?
Don't you?
Nah, I'm kidding.
I've
got a small handful of friends.
Yeah. So, if you didn't have those obligations that force you to go do things, would you have the necessary inspiration to act in a creative manner when you set that time aside for yourself?
I think that that's one of those things where it can go either way, because I feel like if you, like, for instance, if I won the lottery that I don't play, it's like, I would definitely do, like, absolutely fucking nothing for like at least a month. But that's just because I work so hard now.
Right.
It's like once I was done vegging out, then yeah, I'd be going places to find that inspiration and find a greater well to draw from,
Sure.
because there's only so much that you can be inspired by in your apartment or in a vehicle.
Right. Sure.
But I think that at that point, once you have the freedom to choose your surroundings and what it is that you're occupying your time with, I feel like that allows you greater freedom to like flex that creativity muscle, so to speak.
So what do you think creativity is? Because I mean, and I know that I'm a visual artist primarily.
Sure.
You are a fucking hell of a poet. In the vein of I would say Leonard Cohen and what's that fucking guy? Perfect Day.
Lou Reed.
Lou Reed. And you like to make music. You never got really into music, but you can turn a phrase like a motherfucker.
No, yeah, the lyrical writing has always been the thing that appealed to me the most. Yeah.
So, and we've talked about this. It almost feels like, the ideas or the inspiration just kind of comes to you. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything. Just
you go into a flow state. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think that is? And why do you think some people can do that and some people can't do that?
I think, to my opinion, and you can correct me on how you feel about it, but it's like, I feel like it's almost, I don't know what starts anyone on that path, but I feel like it's dissecting what it is that's around you. It's trying to figure out how things work, what things are, looking at something in a different way, and I don't know what starts that part of your mind to working, because I've just always felt that way. But it's kind of like you can't remember a time at which you couldn't speak.
No. Well, no. My memory kicked in around 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that develops, but I do think that there's a level of critical observation that has to be in play in order for you to start being a creative person. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because I mean, it's not necessarily because you can expose hundreds of people to the same thing and only, everybody, there's going to be a consensus view for the most part of how everybody feels about that thing. And then you've got that 1 in 100 people who looks at it and is like, I disagree. I think that this is more emblematic of such and such, or like, I could see how this could be viewed from this other viewpoint that would make it more interesting. It's
Sorry,
like,
so do you think
it's a dissective,
is creativity
mental
to
process.
you boiled down to simply anachronistic associations?
I mean, I feel like that can be part of it. I don't think that that's everybody's experience with creativity, but I do feel like it's the merging of thoughts and concepts that aren't necessarily adjacent to each other. It's like almost tangential thinking.
Well, 2 things that I find interesting on this subject. There's a very famous quote by Pablo Picasso, and he said, all children are artists, but very few remain such into adulthood. And then there's another gentleman who I admire. I've never read any of his books, but I watch his interviews whenever I find one. Jordan Peterson. And he thinks that creativity is an evolutionary, an evolved mechanism in order to problem solve.
I mean, that's a possibility, and it's interesting to think of like how the human mind has evolved over time, like as a thing, because I was actually, it's funny, on the way here I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about why humor and horror are so closely related. And
well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I thought that the interesting part of it was that somebody, one of the 2 people who was having the conversation, brought up that that there's a thought in what's the study of human beings, anthropology. There's a thought by anthropologists,
I think so,
or sociologists, or whatever.
Sociology is the study of humans and civilization.
Sure. So whichever one applies here. But the thought is that imagine that you're a bunch of Neanderthals or cavemen around a fire. And as you're sitting around the fire, you know, like all of a sudden you see a shadow creeping through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you hear the rustling of leaves and everybody gets on edge and they start reaching for like their stone clubs and stuff like that. And then what jumps out is a squirrel.
Right.
And then everybody, the relief. You know, and
okay.
That's the reason why they were speculating that horror and comedy both evolved from kind of the same impulse, because both of them come from a subversion of expectation.
Okay.
And the relief comes after the horror, whereas the comedy is creating that feeling of relief.
The tension.
Subverting expectation.
The tension, yeah. And stand-ups use that all the time. They create a tremendous amount of tension, and then they execute a release valve.
Yeah, exactly. That's the punchline. Yeah,
sure.
So it's like, it's interesting to think of, like, when you're thinking about what started triggering those evolutions in the way that the brain works and everything, like, where did creativity come from? Was it more of that scientific kind of method of like sitting there and looking at fruit in a tree and figuring out a device by which to get it because you're a shitty climber? Like, was that where creativity came from? Or was it seeing lightning and like being like, what the fuck could be doing that? And coming up with gods, you know?
Right. Yeah, the one seems one solving they're both solving problem, because you fear what you don't understand, so you're making an explanation for something that you have absolutely no handle on.
Yeah, no way of, like, at the time that you have no tools at your disposal, so you just have to be like, I have to come up with something that makes this make sense.
Yeah.
So are creatives just people to whom the world doesn't make sense?
Well, I know for me, it's pretty much like, it does feel like I'm solving a problem, but I can remember when I was a child, it felt like play, and maybe play is a precursor to problem solving. But, you know, most creatively, if I'm trying to think about, for example, here's one issue, here's one problem. What is my relationship to the rest of the world? What do you want to be when you grow up? Yeah, the
problem of purpose, I suppose.
Function. Yeah. Function is dictated. Function is very closely associated to ego boundaries and the way that you're perceived by other beings. Looking at what most people choose in order to define themselves in the eyes of others is unsatisfactory to me. So I have to have some sort of creative thinking about what to do with that problem. That's a problem solving.
I mean, sure, you can look at it as even altering the definition of what you are to other people by coming up with a new branding for what you are.
Sure. So I mean, but I mean, then something like what I was doing with the print-on-demand T-shirt ideas for basically 24 hours in my fucking armchair, that felt like play. We've come up with ideas for things before, and what do? We sit around, we get shit hammered, and we make each other laugh, and then we arrive at some ideas. Yeah. It's play.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Is it the want to create something productive out of play then?
You know what I think it is? And maybe this is the misanthrope inside of me is going to bring it.
Don't you mean the misanthrope that is you? But anyway, go on.
Yeah. That I inhabit. It's all around me. It seems like most people want to be told what to do. They want to have a metric by which they can have it judged how well they're doing the thing they were told to do. And then they want opportunity to advance based upon their execution of that thing they were told to do and the metric by which they are judged upon it. It seems like one seems very slavish to me.
I mean, but even when you look at people who are top performers in any kind of like creative vein, like the most successful musicians and things like that, or the most successful artists, I mean, there's no hard metric, but it still is opinion based, and they're still trying to make everybody like it, you know.
I don't know if they're trying to make everybody like it as much as, I mean, if I don't know. Marketing can be creative too. But if you look at, let's say, musicians, because that's really some of the most popular art form in America.
Sure, it's very easily accessible and digestible.
Musicians and actors, I would be like, that's it. You know, that's what we're known for. You know, your success is dependent upon how many other people like it. Marketing can be a creative endeavor as well, but unless you
and marketing can control how many people like something. It's like, I'm sure there are many beautiful songs I've never heard. It's just
never will hear.
Marketed. Yeah,
exactly. You have to have a tremendous amount of money backing you up if you're going to market something and make sure that enough people hear it. And
have you tried making art for exposure? Because I hear there's plenty of places that'll let you pay them to expose your art.
Oh yeah, well they're sure. Well, I mean, when you're a visual artist, the first thing that you run into in trying to market yourself is the pay-for-play gallery system. They don't have to sell your work. They have what they call a juried exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to get big name jurors to come in. God knows how much money they get. People that you've heard of in the fine art world come in to judge the juried exhibition.
And they're being paid through the artist's submission of non-refundable payments to sit there and, you know, be in the exhibition.
So you give them 5 images. It used to be slides. Now, of course, it's digital images. You give them 5 or 10 images. You pay $35 or $50. It's non-refundable. And, you know, they can only include like maybe 15, 20 artists, whatever they can fit in their physical space in the actual show. I'm sure they're getting thousands of submissions. Yeah. That's the way most galleries stay in business. They generally do a juried exhibition once a quarter. It's called an open call. And that's how they make their money. So, and on top of that, if somebody buys something, artists in the 1800s used to complain. This gallery wants like 15%. Now it's 50.
Oh yeah.
I've seen galleries
until you've made a name for yourself. You're giving anything that
even once you have. I've seen galleries as high as 60%
goes to the gallery.
Goes to the gallery. Sales, yeah. Sure.
Because their opinion of it is, if this wasn't here, it wouldn't have sold.
And most of them are making money without any sales.
Oh yeah.
So sales they're not actively
the point, it's the machine.
They're not actively trying to sell anything. And to that fact, when Damien Hirst gave all of his artwork to Christie's to auction, he did an auction show at Christie's without an agent. That was highly controversial because he is represented by a gallery or somebody, and he went around them. He just said, "Nah, I'm done with you."
Yeah. A lot of musicians have been doing that lately with the recording industry too. As long as you've already got a name out there,
as long as you already have a following, that's all that matters. Yeah. The artists that have always spoken to me have been the ones that are honest about how they feel, telling their story, using their own voice. And it almost like you do want it to be relatable, but there's
you don't want it to be pandering.
You don't want exactly. You're not making it for anybody else. You're sitting there and you're putting it out there, and you're waiting for your audience to find you.
It's the difference between like the original Star Wars and the newer Star Wars. It's like the newer Star Wars are pandering.
Thank you, Disney.
Exactly.
Ah, what a great corporation. Woohoo!
Oh, make me more Star Wars.
Yeah.
Gosh, Mickey, I don't know if we've got good stories for more Star Wars. Woohoo! Make it anyway.
Use the other stories. Didn't we already do them? Do them again! Hoo-hoo!
Bring in a bunch of different directors that complain when the whole thing seems like a disjointed mess. Woohoo!
And they had such potential too.
You know what? The funny thing is as far as again, not to get tangential about something specific, but it's like I really liked the second of the new Star Wars movies. I thought it was going in an interesting direction, and like the fan backlash to the whole thing, they were just like, "Nope, bring back in J.J. Abrams."
And here's whenever you start listening to the fans, especially when you have a characters and a franchise and a world that somebody else created and it's no longer in their hands, it's in somebody else's hands. Yeah. I don't know, man. I thought that the 3 prequels that George Lucas made were dog shit compared to the Disney ones. And I hope I get a lot of backlash from that because I need some attention.
Oh, I will completely agree with you. So pile on the dog shit because, yeah, they
were far
worse. Ass.
The Disney ones were extremely disappointing because you saw potential. The 3 prequels, they were just dog shit from beginning to end.
And I think that that's the funny thing is if you think about it as like a train that's making different stops, when you end up with like that large corporate franchise kind of thing, it's like there's different people who liked different parts of that story for different reasons, and you're never going to be able to please all of them. Just make something that holds up on its own. It's like you can't make something in any kind of creative field that's pandering. It's like the whole thing ends up happening.
Well, that's what happened with the DC universe.
Oh yeah, that was pander central.
I mean, you know, what they do, it's like, okay, we see what Marvel's doing. We're going to do something different. We're going to go a little darker. Man of Steel, you know, and start out with that. And then Batman v Superman, and then backlash from the fans. And then you end up with Justice League, the original version, which is a piece of trash.
Oh, you mean the non-Snyder cut, the theatrical version?
Yeah, and who's that director that took over? Because Snyder,
Joss Whedon.
Snyder's daughter
died in a car crash, I believe.
In a car crash. So he removed himself from the project after, I think, principal photography was finished. And then
or at least most of principal photography. Joss Whedon.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. He's gay, right?
I actually have no idea about his. I don't know enough about the guy.
I heard somewhere that he was, and it got me thinking.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Should we keep? Because Joel Schumacher fucked up Batman.
If you're trying to say that gay people shouldn't be allowed to be directors,
no. But maybe not superhero movies. I'm just saying, 2 for 2, you lost? Maybe. I'm just saying people need to think about it.
I think that the problem stems more from...
Listen, if we need to have a law that homosexuals cannot direct superhero movies to save my movies, I think that that's a little bit of intolerance that community can take on the head at this point. Because we need our superhero movies. What's America going to do without their superhero movies? Wait for the end of the empire. We need the distraction. That's our modern day Coliseum. And if the gay people are going to keep screwing up the Coliseum, can't they take one for the team? Can't you just stay out of that?
All I've got to say is if you think that the problem with movies where grown men in tights and fabulous capes hang around with young boys in tights in fabulous capes, and you think that gay people aren't going to be able to direct that, who can?
The proof's in the pudding, my friend.
I don't know.
If Whedon, I think he might be gay.
Hey, Chris, so you're saying that Joss Whedon is gay and that's why he can't do good superhero movies?
No, I'm saying it's a possibility. Because so is Schumacher.
Did you like The Avengers?
I did.
Joss Whedon directed The Avengers.
Oh, motherfucker. I had a theory.
Case solved.
I had a theory. All right.
It was a terrible theory. I just want to go on record as saying that.
It's not a terrible theory. What the hell happened to Justice League?
Here's what happened to Justice League.
And also the fucking nipples on Batman. Schumacher.
Well, that was Schumacher.
Yeah.
But here's what happened with Justice League is you had principal photography done by the guy who made Watchmen, and then direction after the fact done by the guy who made snarky Tony Stark Avengers.
It didn't work.
It doesn't fit together.
Yeah.
He was using puzzle pieces that were made for a different puzzle.
All right, let me have the camera for a second. Listen, gays, I'm sorry. It was just a theory. I was thinking I saw something, and maybe you'd like to take one for the team to help distract the general population from the declining empire that we are existing in. But obviously, I misspoke. It was a bad theory. I apologize. But anyway. So, okay, you're right. Fair enough. So the guy who did photography for that did the photography for Watchmen?
Zack Snyder was the director of Watchmen.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Watchmen was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't like it. I enjoyed it. I think the graphic novel's better, but that's just the nature of the beast.
So what do you think is keeping, like, you have somebody like Zack Snyder.
Who also did 300.
Incredible. Jesus Christ. I mean, you have somebody like that, and then you have this report that came out that most Americans claim they don't dream, and most Americans claim they do not have internal dialogue. And then you have people that can basically just, I'm not saying he created the stories, those are based on graphic novels,
sure,
obviously. Yeah. But they can basically bring a world to life before the eyes of an awe-filled audience. What's the difference between those two types of human beings? What is creativity? How do so many people lose it if they ever had it at all?
Yeah, I mean...
And don't we want more of that? But so often, I mean, like me in my chair for 24 hours, anybody walking by would be like, look at that lazy motherfucker.
Well, sure, and I think that's... I think that it's difficult for people who don't have creative impulses themselves to understand something that has value without metrics, if that makes sense. Like, because they're always measuring their lives.
It's almost like they don't have anything in the world that they want to see done. So they go to somebody else and say, hey, here's what I can do. What do you think I should put my energy toward? Can you pay me to do that?
Yeah, here are my abilities. What can I do to monetize them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it really, that really does seem to be the dividing line, doesn't it?
Well, it's funny because it's one of those things where I've often thought about, because I have, you know, not that I'm blowing sunshine on my ass, but I'm a very multi-talented individual.
Ooh.
There's a lot of things that I can do. And I've thought about changing work paradigms just because there are certain things that I'd find more fulfilling than what I currently do or that pay better.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because everybody's looking for metrics. And so it's like, it's impossible for me to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I want this type of job. I know I'd be good at it. And they'd be like, show me that on paper. I can't until you let me do this job. Well, you can't do this job until you can prove that you do this job. Like, fuck you. But anyway.
We should talk about that off camera, because that's merely a point of selling yourself to somebody. There are ways to do that.
Oh, no, I gotcha. I was just bringing it up in general as a concept around creativity, that it's probably really difficult for people who aren't creative themselves to, like, I was trying to tie it into, like, you sitting there on the chair doing nothing.
Right.
For a bunch of hours. You know, it's like, well, it's all happening in your head. How do you put a metric on thoughts per minute? You know, that's what I was trying to bring up, is like, well,
yeah, exactly.
You know, there's no metric by which you can measure.
Well, I think it's kind of like the difference between self-esteem and self-acceptance. You know, self-esteem, you are comparing your output, your actual existence, your life, your thoughts, whatever. And me and Harry were talking about this the other day, actually. Setting yourself up against an ideal, that way you have something to judge yourself by, which is kind of like religion, morality, status quo, society. Right. You have metrics. The closer you are to this ideal, like Jesus Christ, whatever.
Yeah.
Or George Washington or Alex Jones, the closer you are to this ideal, the better person you are. And the more you deviate from that ideal, the worse person you are. You are a sinner, or you're antisocial.
Or you're lazy.
Or you're lazy. So, I mean, self-acceptance is the only way to get around self-esteem. Self-esteem is so dependent upon metrics. You have to have something to work for so you can be proud of yourself. Self-acceptance is just like, whatever I end up doing, I'm great.
I mean, I almost think
this is what I am. I'm here, so obviously I'm meant to be here. I'm not gonna fucking try to prove it. Or we seem to have this thing in our society where that people feel from a very early age, it's foisted upon them. They need to validate their existence somehow.
Sure. And that's, look at me, Mom. Like, every kid has been doing something in their backyard at a family get-together and been desperately trying to get their parents' attention to impress them with it. Yeah, because they want the validation of, isn't this cool? Yeah, look at me, Mom. I'm about to go off the diving board. Look at this picture I made, Mom.
Look at me, Mom. Okay, I thought you said Meemaw. I was like,
no.
Fuck, do we call Meemaw?
I'm not telling kids to look at their poorly named grandmas.
Okay.
No,
I got you. Look at me, Mom.
But yeah, look at me, Mom. Look over here. Look at what I'm doing.
I think it goes beyond that. That's just, I want attention. I'm proud of myself. That's a very joyous thing. Especially when you're so young, you're not even catching your own eye in the mirror yet. You can't really go down a psychological rabbit hole with somebody that age. I'm talking about being told you need to earn a living, which is almost the same thing as saying, hey, you are alive, you're taking up space. You need to make it worth everybody else's while because you are taking up resources that could otherwise be.
Sure, I mean? and it's always attached to production rather than I like having you around.
Rather than what?
I like having you around.
Sure.
It's always
which
like,
even Ayn Rand gave room for that. Her husband.
Oh yeah, sure.
Was an unemployed artist, and she loved him. So yeah, it's always very much about production. It's about an exchange, usually at an hourly rate. What can you get done in an hour versus what I have to pay you in an hour?
Yeah, exactly.
The commodification of life.
Yeah, it's exactly. I want you to produce X amount of product per hour, and I'm going to pay you way less than that because I need to make my profit.
Right, exactly.
I'm the one who set up this situation in which you can trade in your time for money, so better give me time.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, do you think that all children have that creative aspect and then they lose it? Or do you think that it's more along the lines of Monty Python's people aren't wearing enough hats skit? And before we go into that, maybe we want to show that skit. I don't think we ever have before. I don't know.
Oh, are we allowed to?
Oh, yeah, never mind. We probably won't be allowed to. Okay. So the skit goes, people are not born with a soul ex nihilo, but only through carefully cultivated self-observation can human beings develop a soul. The problem is that life offers far too many distractions, and also people aren't wearing enough hats. And then the other person at the meeting goes, what was that thing you were saying about hats again?
Well, yeah, I think that you did a better job than I would have.
I was just trying to keep it brief, so we could get back to.
But no, the funny thing about that scene to me is always that the hats are brought up first. Yeah, so it's like people aren't wearing enough hats.
Oh yeah.
Secondly, and then he goes into the entire thing, and then like that's the
problem of the human soul,
right?
And then the guy's like,
"What was that
you said about hats?"
Yeah. Exactly.
So, I mean, do you think that it is that, you know, there is a creativity that comes with being born, and then we are distracted away from it, or we have the potential to be creative and we're distracted away from it.
I would
I mean, I am equating creativity with a soul to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I would sit there and assume that it's probably inherent or innate in everyone when they're born, because the reason why humans out of all animals are born with such, like, they're born too early.
Oh yeah.
And
right. biologically
right. speaking,
because of the tip of the pelvis to stand upright.
Yeah, and the softness and the size of their head, and yeah.
Right.
So it's like humans technically are born undercooked, so to speak. And so
the blankest of blank slates.
So I think that every child, the world is making impressions on them. The question is, what is that child's world? And I feel like that ends up largely controlled by the types of people that they're around. And I think that when you sit there and you have people saying that they don't have inner monologues or that they don't remember their dreams and stuff like that,
right,
it's probably a situation in which they were surrounded by people who put no emphasis on creativity, who, when their child sat there and was like, came up with some wild story about something, they're the type of family or parents or whatever who either said, whatever, that's nice, honey, and went back to their adult conversation, thus shifting the child's perspective on what is and isn't important.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, like the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah, so I mean, I guess you're saying that most likely everybody has that potential, but then early on in the learning process, you're figuring out what's useful and what's not useful in your environment.
Exactly.
And most people are growing up in an environment where that type of lateral thinking, or whatever you want to call it, is not conceived of as useful.
Yeah, it's
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's disregarded in the environment that they're in. So it's like, oh, well, that's not important to latch on to, I mean, so let's stop devoting mental space to that.
What's the thing that every fucking kid hears? It was just a dream. Just a dream.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right there, that makes it less important. Just, you know, less important than other things that you experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's probably a large part of, like, plays a large part into whether or not you're going to have creative impulses as you get older, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because if you're the type of kid who, like, comes up with this crazy story and your parents are like, oh my God, that's amazing. And dad comes home from work and like, hey, little Johnny, tell your dad what you told me earlier. Tell him the story about how, you know.
Right.
And so now they're, oh, she wants me to tell dad. It must have been good.
Right. Yeah.
You know, whereas if it's a situation where, oh, mom, this thing happened and I was an orc and I was fighting in a forest and blood, and it's like, no, you weren't. Stop.
Right. So I guess that you and I maintained a certain degree of that because we do have, at least one of our parents was creative and the other one was kind of like nonplussed about that sort of thing.
I would say that the parent who was nonplussed wasn't nonplussed. It was that he had a great love for creativity. He loved books. He loved comics.
That's true.
Sat there and would play games with us with lightsabers, and he had his own action figures for him to play with us.
You could look at it that way. True. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we had it from both sides. Like, he wasn't a creator, but he was a lover of creative things.
Yeah, and he had a playful attitude because he was so young.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, that really is, you know what? And it's so funny, especially with, you know, let's bring this back to the tune of AI. You know, you are going to have to be pretty fucking creative coming up in the next few years to have any marketable skills whatsoever. I mean, and unless we just need a billion bricklayers before we can build the robots. You know what I mean?
Hey, if we start building robots out of bricks, kill two birds with one stone. Brick bots, make it happen, world.
So what's your creative process? I mean, what gives you the impetus where you know that it's time for you to sit down and write something?
Usually it's funny. I don't think we've ever really discussed this. So ironically, despite I'm not that I am incapable of creating visual art. I'm obviously, you know, I can do it to certain levels. I haven't honed the skill as much as you have, but most of it's visual. Like, I will see a scenario in my head and then try to write words that would put that scenario in someone else's head, or that feeling into somebody else's head. Like, how can I, because I can't make you see my thoughts or feel how it feels to be in this dream. How can I write something that will evoke the closest thing to that in someone who reads it or hears it?
Right.
So it's really about sharing things that you can't share through language, and thus having to be very creative with your use of language.
I'm reminded of the line, because basically what you're doing is you are trying to bring somebody else, or share your experience with somebody else. You're trying to bring them as close to what you're experiencing as possible through a specific medium. And you're using words to paint a picture or describe feeling. It reminds me of this. There's this great movie called Immortal Beloved, starring Gary Oldman.
Oh, as Beethoven.
He plays Beethoven. And he sits down with, he's deaf at this point, and he sits down in a little room where somebody's playing one of his piano pieces, and there's a guy listening, and he's just so moved by the music, and the guy doesn't know that Beethoven just walked in, the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
So he sits down next to this guy, and he goes, what do you think? He's butchering it, I'm sure. And the guy looks at him, how dare you? And he goes, oh, I can't hear. I can't hear anything he's doing. And then he slowly gives away that he's the motherfucker who wrote this piece of music that has you in tears. And he goes, well, let me ask you something. What do you think the purpose of music is? And the guy writes down on the chalkboard, to elevate the soul. He goes, nonsense. Blah, blah, blah. He gives a bunch of reasons why, and to bring people together. He goes, nonsense. No, he says to elevate the soul, and he goes, when you hear military music, you march. That's not elevating the soul. You know, and his conclusion is, Beethoven's character, it is hypnosis. It is to bring the audience into the mind of the creator. And that's all it is. And I don't know, I feel like every fucking thing that human beings do on this planet revolves around story. Story seems to be the most important thing that we have about being human.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think about history, really started as oral tradition of telling the stories of your forebears and their great wars, and the stories of the gods, and the story, you know, it's like
telling the story about who's throwing the lightning bolts.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's adding context to everything that came before you, because you will never get to see or understand the chain of events that brought you into being.
Well, I don't think time is necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing about story seems to be contextualizing what is otherwise chaotic in order for people to have an emotional catharsis.
Sure, yeah.
It's the creation of meaning.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I thought that's what I was driving toward. Maybe I phrased it poorly.
Oh, okay. I just don't think that it necessarily has to be about
I didn't mean that it was about
past or
but what I mean is, because you'll never get to experience the generations that came before, it's giving contextualization to the world.
Well, any unknown. It doesn't have to be simply historical.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Any unknown,
I got you.
Or anything that just seems chaotic. You can contextualize it into a story, and it creates meaning. and you can try to guide it to where it's going through the evolution of that story, creating an arc, getting better because of it, becoming more skillful, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell and all that.
Even rhetorical devices like satire and parody, it's to sit there and make you think about your world in a different way, to sit there and realize that you don't have to just look at things at face value or to question what it is that you're seeing, Yeah, it's definitely got a purpose of contextualization to it.
So, what do you think the purpose of creativity in American culture should be? Because it seems like it is the most important thing that we produce for the entire world, and it's hollow and monetized at the same time. It's very strange to me to look at the creative scene in American culture specifically, because it's so corporate. It's so much money is placed in back of so few projects, too big to fail. Then every once in a while you have something like a Kurt Cobain come along, or Jimi Hendrix. It's just too wild, too far out there to ignore, too honest. That kind of hits the nail on the head of where everybody's at, what everybody's thinking. The Beatles, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
But, between those outliers that seem to gain the attention and the notoriety based upon their own honesty and their own soul search, between that, I mean, you end up with years of hair metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you end up with movies like Appaloosa with Renee Zellweger looking like a butterbeer face, like her cheeks got stung with a bunch of bees. I don't know what the hell happened to her, but she looks horrible. And that movie sucks.
I don't think I've ever seen that one, but I'll take your word.
Don't watch it.
Nah, I gotcha.
They tricked me twice.
Tricked me? How did it trick you twice?
Because I saw it years and years and years ago.
I forgot whether or not.
And I was like, that looks good. And I wasted 2 hours. And it happened to me fucking last weekend. And I read it and I was like, that looks good. Wait, this looks familiar. Oh, shit.
Oh, God, why?
Torture me twice. Fool me once, shame on you. So, why do we're producing so much shit just for $1? But, it's... I don't know, but I mean, isn't it kind of like art and creativity seems to be like the Ouroboros? It's the point where the serpent bites its own tail. It's both worthless, and it's the only reason why civilization exists.
Yeah, and I think everything tends to run in cycles in those kind of spheres and everything. I mean, you're already seeing people starting to get fatigued by the MCU and stuff like that, not being as enthusiastic because you can't. When you catch lightning in a bottle, you can't just keep keeping it in a bottle. You're just oh, I'm just going to run around with this bottle and just catch all the lightning now. It's not really how it works. Okay. But eventually you've got to move on and do something else. And I think those big sea changes that you're talking about in any kind of creative field generally stem from the over-commodification of creativity in a specific direction, because there's nobody in a capitalistic system. You're never going to end up in a situation where somebody just wants art to exist. Everybody's looking for a return on it, and so if I invest in you, I need to make a return. And until you can get beyond that commodification of the arts, it's just that's just the way it's going to keep cycling, and you'll have those spikes where you get some people who are in that investment scale or the studio system who are like, no, I want to catch lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. Where's all the lightning at? Right. And they'll do it, and you'll get those big sea changes like the Beatles. You'll get Kurt Cobain and grunge. You'll get the MCU, which isn't necessarily the most creative thing, but it was definitely very deftly pulled off. It was just a perfect amalgamation of just having the right casting, the right people writing it.
I loved everything through
Endgame. Yeah,
Endgame. I love those movies, so I'm not shitting on those movies at all.
But I mean, it's like you sat there and you had revolutions in filmmaking, like in the 70s, when they started doing like that really like down to earth, like kind of like true slice of life stories. I mean, a lot of people forget like the first Rocky movie was like actually like it won the Academy Award for best writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was written by Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, there's a documentary on him now on Netflix I watched the other day. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm sure. They led an interesting life, you know?
The only thing that really irritates me about that documentary is his cheek implants are crazy, and I don't know why he did that, and I can't stop looking at him. He didn't even have cheeks like that when he was younger. Like, why are you doing that? Stop, don't do that.
It might be like too much Botox. It might not necessarily be a cheek.
No, it's like these things.
No, it's like
right
it's puffy.
Here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like underneath the bone, like right here. And look at him when he was younger; it was like flat. You know.
Yeah. Very, very sullen cheeks.
But yeah, and great documentary. And here's a guy who is telling a story, and it's a story. You know, you want to talk about lightning in a bottle. This is the everyday working man. You know, when it was clear to Americans that the middle class was eroding, there was a lack of hope. There, you know, you couldn't have on one income that house, 2 cars, 9 to 5, leave it to Beaver type of lifestyle.
Yeah, everybody in that movie just had terrible jobs. Like there was there was nobody in the core group of characters. I mean, like he was a low-level mob enforcer, you know,
exactly.
It's like because it was the only thing that he was good at was roughing people up.
And wasn't it Paulie was the meat packer?
Yeah,
right?
Paulie was the meat packer. That's why he was sitting there and practicing with the sides
Adrian
of beef.
worked in a pet shop. Yeah. So I mean, you know, that right there, lightning in a bottle is he's taking a situation that so many people are experiencing, creating a story out of it that centers around one person's perspective, and that perspective gives the audience an emotional catharsis because it creates meaning from what they look around and see as meaningless.
Yeah, and then you know you sit there and while the rest of the Rocky movies, you know, sit there and have a lot of, you know, memorable moments and everything. It's like everything past Rocky 1, the tone is completely different.
Sure.
Like once it was serialized into something to sit there and like continue the franchise, it's like the tone was just absolutely night and day. Because like
I thought they were fun. I've watched them all again recently, but Rocky 1 is an outlier. It's a bit different than the rest.
It's got a very different tone.
Different tone. Yeah, but. So, I mean, if you look at it this way, if a family experiences a house fire, the first thing that they run for to save
is anything that's not replaceable.
Family photos. Most people answer family photos.
Sure.
Now, this is before the digital age.
All of your photos are on the internet. So.
When all of your photos were on paper and plastic and they couldn't be replaced. They didn't exist in a cloud. There was no such thing. Everybody answered family photos. Now, what happens when a country is being bombed, and we saw this during World War II, what's the first thing a country goes to protect other than its infrastructure so it can continue fighting, obviously?
Well, yeah, sure.
Other than that, it puts its art into storage.
Oh, sure.
Puts its art in the bunkers. Its history, its culture, its art. It tries to protect its art. And when one country successfully invades another one, like Hitler did, it's the first thing that gets looted is the art. And it gets brought back to Germany or wherever. And the treasures are being stolen. At the same time, nowadays in America, the people that are creating these treasures, generally speaking, are not being rewarded.
Oh, no, yeah, exactly.
It's very strange. It's disturbing to me. So do you know the story of the CIA getting in touch with Jackson Pollock?
Yeah, but go ahead, because I'm sure it's not a common story.
Okay. So here's the thinking. After World War II, we realized that we were in a struggle with the Soviets for dominance of the globe. The Soviets had a very specific style of art that was largely considered propaganda, just like the Nazis did. There's a bunch of gorgeous Nazi artwork that's just very much about, these, genetic super people, whatever.
The quote unquote triumph of the human spirit.
The triumph of the human spirit. Now, are all the humans whose spirits have triumphed in this art white? Yes, they are. But what I'm saying is the art itself is very beautiful.
Oh, sure. From an aesthetic point of view.
It is locked away in a basement. No one's allowed to look at it. For some reason, people consider this artwork very, very dangerous. I saw glimpses of it in one documentary somebody showed me in my 20s, and I cannot remember the name of it. Otherwise, I'd say it so you could find it. So we saw the potential for art to kind of coerce people's opinions, like we were saying before with the movie Immortal Beloved, where Beethoven says it's about hypnotism.
Oh, sure. I mean, the easiest way to turn people's minds is to sway their hearts.
Exactly.
Get people, I mean, look at everything that's on any kind of social media today. It's like, it's all about getting people to co-opt their thinking to somebody else by playing their heartstrings.
Exactly. And I think we probably just hit on the nail on the head why, other than the fact that people have vested interest in it, why music becomes so fucking boring and repetitive. Because it's the easiest thing to capture people's hearts. You gotta keep it bland. If there was a band that was all about overthrowing the government and the malfeasance of
you mean Rage Against the Machine?
Yeah, exactly. There's really no calls to action, I would guess. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be as popular as they were. But then again, they kind of grew their fan base out of the grunge era, which seems like it was kind of like
very largely counterculture. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really planned for or on. But, I mean, as far as fine visual art goes, the CIA got in touch with Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock was a splatter painter. They wanted non-representational art. The CIA, this is the story, wanted non-representational art to be kind of the filigree for American culture, to be in opposition to what was being applauded by communist societies. Communist societies were very representational, triumphy of the human spirit. And what the CIA wanted for America and the West and capitalism was to be a non-representational, commodified type of art. And they got artists like Jackson Pollock, they put him up on a pedestal because he was already going in this direction. And over time, you can kind of see it as being made to be, if you don't understand it, it must be art. And by the way, it's because you're not educated. You're a fucking idiot. And maybe if you were smart enough to get this piece of art, you'd be able to afford it. Whereas if you ask somebody what type of music they like, no difficulty with that whatsoever. Well, I like this band and that band.
The point
you ask somebody what type of, I don't know anything about that. Stay away. You don't want to look stupid.
Yeah, sure, but the point being is that, like, it would be nigh impossible to do that with music because you'd almost have to make, like, bad conceptual music like Yoko Ono and stuff like that.
Right.
And there's
exactly. No one would buy.
Yeah, the thing is that looking at something that's ugly that you've been told is brilliant. You can kind of do that because it's not assaulting your senses. Or you can even tell yourself that the assault on your senses is the whole point. Listening to something that's going to give you tinnitus is literally painful. So there's a visceral reaction that oral stimulation and oral art, oral
audible.
Yeah, oral is also correct. AURAL. Not
okay.
OL.
I got you.
But it's like, but yeah, whenever you're dealing with something that can have a visceral, painful feeling, it would be like. So the only thing that I could give an equivalency to that is if you tried to sit there and push some kind of commodified art on people that literally glowed as bright as an arc welder and made you go temporarily blind from looking at it. And I don't think you could get people to agree that that was art.
I think, you could.
Well, I mean, I guess with enough money and clout behind it, you know, you could convince anything's anything. But yeah.
And you'd have a bunch.
You'd have an uphill battle.
You'd have people racing each other to buy it. Just no one would ever look at it because it's painful.
Well, I mean, you even look at things like Einstreise de Neubauten. You know, it's like,
yeah,
like there's not a lot of their stuff that is really like sit down and listen to a bull, if that's even a phrase. But you know what I mean. But like, so it's meant to be an assault on your senses.
Or Boyd Rice's Non.
Yeah, Non. Like those
NON.
are like those are conceptual music, and it's like it's
hard to listen to.
Oh yeah, like even if you get what it's about or you find it interesting, it is not a pleasant experience.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, that's the way I feel when I walk into the MoMA. For the most part, I feel assaulted.
Yeah, visually assaulted. Sure.
I feel like not only am I being visually assaulted, but my intelligence is being assaulted. My intelligence is being undermined. I mean,
very demeaning. I
mean, you walked in with me the one day we went together. I think where they had the
Winnie the Pooh,
coloring book. Somebody scribbled with different colors on them, and then they tore the pages out of the coloring book, and they basically taped the pages to the wall, and each one was like, how much money?
Oh, yeah, this is art. It's in the MoMA. It's in the Museum of Modern Art in downtown fucking Manhattan.
So there's your context. There's the meaning. The context and the meaning in American art has been the commodification thereof.
Yeah.
The context and the meaning is the gallery and the museum. It's the buyer. It's the audience. It's the investment. It has nothing to do with the story of the creator.
Yeah, it's putting shit on a pedestal.
There's a guy that literally made earrings out of his own shit. He wrapped his own shit up in tinfoil. Pretty sure that's accurate.
I believe it. There's a guy who duct taped a banana to a wall. Sold like gangbusters.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the important thing about creativity that you because I feel like our country is in a really bad place because I think we have no cultural identity, no cohesion in our country because of the commodification of creativity.
I think that part of that is social media's fault. I feel like giving a voice to everybody.
That's terrible.
I'm not going to go that far, but giving a voice to everybody has clouded the niche in which art existed. Art was to communicate en masse to people. Art was to unify people with an emotion, with a thought, with just something that brought people together or tore people apart. Because art can be divisive, and it's still
a collective catharsis.
Yeah, exactly.
The catharsis is the shared experience.
Whereas now I feel like that's just been completely co-opted by internet life and like shit posting people on Twitter. Like, you want to talk about conceptual art, shit posting has become the new conceptual art.
It really has been elevated in certain places too in art form. Yeah.
And now they don't have to pay anybody for it. It's all free and they get the advertisement revenue.
Yeah.
So why would you pay an artist to say something when you can make money off of people shitposting?
I don't know.
Because shitposting gets hate clicks. Hate clicks are just as valuable as like clicks.
I don't know, man. It's getting bad out there. It seems like it's going downhill real fast.
Oh, yeah. I feel like it's accelerating. But I mean, I feel like...
And there's nothing that you can point to and be like, yeah, but there's that. Humanity's going to be okay. I don't see anything.
And I think that the thing is that a lot of what people digest now has moved away from art and towards commentary. You know, there are more people probably that watch videos of other people playing video games than there are people who play video games.
Yeah, but somebody's still making the video games.
Oh, sure.
But then you're saying that the content creation is just
yeah, it just keeps getting like bumped down the line. So it's like you've got somebody who's making...
The more meta it is, the less creative it is.
And you've got somebody who's making millions of dollars because people like watching them interact with someone else's art.
Mm-hmm.
So that company that made that video game that person's playing made $60 off of that guy. He made $2 million this year.
Right.
Because we're all just, instead of I feel like it's just oversaturation, and I'm wondering how things will evolve from this, because I do think that art goes in cycles with stuff like that, and I feel like we're kind of at a low point, and I feel like it'll uptick at some point. At some point, you know, the most popular things on YouTube will start becoming things that are creative again. You know, I mean, there's groups out there who have YouTube channels who make like brilliant fucking short films and shit like that, and they get millions of viewers and stuff like that.
Sure.
And that's beautiful, because that's somebody actually circumventing the studio system.
I mean, you could fucking shoot like a halfway decent film on an iPhone now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not hard.
Yeah, the technology has never been more accessible.
The barrier to entry
Yeah.
is way down. Way down.
Yeah, because I mean, if you wanted to make a good-looking film even 10 years ago, it's like you were spending a couple of grand on a friggin' camera, you know?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
At least. And probably 5 figures.
Yeah, probably like 20 grand or something like that.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's
now
not
you
to
look
mention,
at something recorded on an iPhone, you wouldn't even know it was.
Yeah.
You know.
So it's like, but with that lowered barrier to entry, with all those, with that cacophony of voices, I think it's going to take time for that to stabilize, and for people who are really elevating the medium to get their feet. But I think there'll probably be a resurgence of less shit posting and more like real art.
I don't know.
I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. I really do see a cultural creative vacuum in this country that's so obfuscated. Obfuscated. The vacuum seems to be obfuscated by the money surrounding the void.
Sure.
It's kind of like a black hole. You can't see the black hole because no light escapes, you know? There's so much darkness, money around this void.
No, I
you can't see it. I don't know. It's just my opinion.
But I mean, I think that the easier things to do are already starting to sit there, and like the things that have the lower barriers to entry, like comedy. There's a lot of good comedy content that's coming out on YouTube.
That's true.
You know, and I feel like high art tends to follow comedy into places. I mean, you just look at like Bo Burnham's Netflix special. It's like, that's comedy as high art.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. You're talking about the one they made during the pandemic?
Yeah, Inside.
That was an amazing movie. That was incredible.
But that's what I mean. It's like that's an art piece.
Absolutely. Oh, no, he was definitely like hitting a raw nerve there that's so probably shared by so many different people.
Oh, sure. But my point is that Bo Burnham, as far as I know, his career basically started out from him posting silly short shit on YouTube back in the day, you know, when he was 16 or whatever. And that's how he ended up in stand-up comedy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you can see it, also when you can see in real time what's giving you positive feedback and what is being ignored, and it's immediate, you're probably going to take less chances, and that's not healthy for creativity.
And I think that that's where like the real creatives will have to rise to the top above the chaff, is the people who are like, no, I've got a vision with this. Maybe I'm doing it a little wrong, but I've still got this vision.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And you're not so enthralled to the immediate response that you're getting. You know, you're going to let it bake for a little bit before you put it out, maybe, or even you put it out, you know, whatever you're doing, it's something that you put out right away, but, you know, you're not going and checking the comments every 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
Sure. And I think that a lot of that is, you know, I think because so many people, everybody I know has got a YouTube channel, basically. I mean, it's like, especially younger people, it's like,
sure,
they're all trying to be YouTube famous.
Sure.
And, you know, I mean, they're sitting there and like doing really bad, canny comedy, or they're kids who are like unboxing anime toys and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, it's just people making content. But I do I do feel like...
And I tell you what, when I'm fucking hungover as shit, which I'm assuming most people are in America most of the time, I like watching that stuff.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is I do think that with that many people involved, it's going to take a little bit of time for, like, because I feel like we're still, even though the internet has solidified as a commodity itself, like everything's figured out how to work their monetization, creatives have started figuring out how to capitalize on the way it works.
Sure.
You know, we've got plenty of YouTube millionaires, Mr. Beast, you know, Pat,
sure.
PewDiePie, you know, you've got tons of YouTube personalities who, because they were riding that first wave and they got it quicker than everyone else, but now they've made the blueprint.
Right.
And now you're going to get to see that kind of mastery in people who are imitating their quality, but while coming up with more creative ideas.
Right.
And I think that that'll come around, especially with this generation that's been growing up on YouTube. You know, I mean, the reason why we have the MCU is because we had the comic books that came out in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and the kids grew up on that, and they started making the television series that came out in the 90s, like X-Men, and, you know, and the kids who grew up on that were like, yeah, but what if it didn't have to be a cartoon? What if we could make it real? And the technology finally caught up with that passion. And I think that the passion's there. I think that I think that the way that art is going to work in the future, I don't think it's solidified yet.
You do think the passion's there?
There are so many kids who want to be creatives.
It's a lot of distractions, though.
Oh, sure. But there are a lot of kids who are passionate about it. And it's like, you know, everybody who goes to film school doesn't end up making film for a living. And so it's like, I think that there's enough of them out there who are really passionate about the creative function of it and not the becoming famous part of it.
Okay.
I think those people will end up on top at some point.
I mean, the lower the barrier to entry is, it seems like it's more and more difficult to keep your focus on what your vision is because there's so much more distraction. There's so much more noise than there is signal.
Sure, and I think that can have a retarding effect on it.
I think, you know, based upon what you're saying, and I'm thinking while you're talking, it seems, I would guess that's what's happening right now.
But I think that eventually you'll get a breakthrough on that, though. I think eventually there's going to be so much noise that it's going to sit there, and the people who aren't really trying to express vital, interesting, or novel things are going to peter out because there's just going to be so much bullshit, and they're going to realize I'm never going to be famous at this, you know, or, you know, there's going to be so much content that you're not going to be able to sift through it, so you're just going to give up on it. And I think that, you know, that could have a stabilizing effect. Either that or it's going to make the entire platform crash, at which point a new platform will rise to take the place of the vacuum. So it's like, I mean, either way, whether it collapses in on itself like a dying star or becomes constant static noise, you know, there will have to be a paradigm shift.
Right.
You know.
Well, hey, man, I hope you're right. And I hope there are passionate people out there that are still trying to do their own thing.
I'm masturbating right now.
That aren't so hung up on, you know, whose hand their dick's in. I like that you wanted to end on a positive note there. I think that's a good place to stop that conversation. What do you say we take a short break and then we'll do some InfoWars headlines with Alex Jones.
Alrighty, sounds like a plan. We'll be back
right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, here to bring you the info and the wars. Alex Jones.
That's right, Alex Jones coming here to you live from the prison planet. I'm going to tell you, we got a lot of crazy stuff going on in our country right now. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be here for Halloween. I was taking my kids out trick-or-treating, and I tell you, you got to watch these bastards out there. I mean, I live in a pretty affluent neighborhood, you know, not a lot of illegal immigrants and such, and I'll tell you, I sat there and, like, even with that, my kids came home, I sat there and I inspect all their candy, because you know about this, they'll put razor blades in apples, they'll do all sorts of crazy crap, and you know what I end up finding? My little son 5-year-old boy, tears in his eyes, strong, manly kid, comes up to me with his Snickers bar, and he's like, Daddy, I think there's a rip in this wrapper. And I took a look, and sure enough, somebody had tampered with this candy. I sat there, ripped off the wrapper, cracked open there, and instead of nuts and nougat, you know what was in there? Liberalism. My son almost ate liberalism. You gotta be careful around these shysters. I'll tell you, it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in. You can sit there and be in the nicest, whitest place in America, and you can still end up with somebody trying to poison your child on Halloween with leftist propaganda. Now, let's see what we got going on, speaking of leftist propaganda in the news here. All right, let's see. Girls' schools are still offering something special. Head. Now, I don't understand what's going on here, because the entire thing is that the way that this is worded is extremely off-putting to me, and I'm going to tell you, by the looks of the smile on this woman in the photo, apparently the head is working out for her. Now, you sit there and you talk about the corruption of our children. They're sitting there and they're putting litter boxes in schools for kids that want to be cats. Now all of a sudden they're performing cunnilingus. I'm gonna ask you, if you're sitting there and you're letting your kids believe that they're pussies or eat pussy, you are ending up in a world of hurt as far as this goes. Now, over here, we've got statistics show that teen pregnancy drops off significantly after the age of 25. Now, this is why statistics are important, is because if you didn't realize that, I mean, in all honesty, the drop-off rate for teen pregnancy used to be in its 40s, so I'm glad that we're down to 25 now, because I'll tell you, these 25-year-old teenagers walking around wearing these slutty outfits, I mean, I don't even know what to do anymore, because you sit there and you go to a bar, and boom, you could get somebody teen pregnant at the age of 21. And I don't think anybody wants that. That's why I ID every teenage 30-year-old that I come into contact with. I sit there and they pull out their ID, sitting there at 25. Sorry, I can't get teen pregnant. I mean, it's not something that I can do. You don't want to sit there and have teen pregnancy amidst post-college graduates. It's a plague, and it's being promoted by liberal media. Now, next up, here we got a man was arrested after cops spot suspiciously small package in his undies. And I'm going to tell you there, I've never run into this before. This is a situation that I absolutely cannot fathom. I can't relate to it. I don't understand why the news is posting anything that I can't believe in, because the news is there fundamentally to sit there and let me know what it is that I should believe in. And I can't agree with this, because any time that I've been caught with a small package in my undies, I just tell the cops it's not mine. They'll sit there and they'll try, well, it's attached to you, sir. And I'm like, no, it's not. Are you suggesting that this is my package? I don't think so. My package is righteous. It is thunderous. It is veiny. And it looks like a baby's arm that is holding a small plum. Now, I know that that's a little weird. Most people say apple, but you have to understand my shaft just kind of goes directly into the head. That's neither here nor there. The point is this man is getting arrested because his package is suspiciously small. I'm going to tell you something. I bet you that man, his package is small because he sat there and was raised in one of these girls' schools that's sitting there and offering head to people. And so he just goes there. He's like, well, I'm close enough to a woman because of my small package. And then the next thing you know, he's sitting there getting head from girls. And guess what that gets you? Teen pregnant at 25. Now, we've got to keep this show going. We've got to keep the lights on here. I mean, you've already heard about our numerous bankruptcy filings. I owe this company that's owned by these other people whose last name is also Jones $50 million. I can't say anything to that. I don't know these people. I was raised by them, but I mean, we've never really had any kind of in-depth talks. So I'm going to sit there and just say, it's just a company. That is not me trying to hide my money from any kind of litigation. But because of all this money that I owe to my nutraceutical companies, I got to keep selling them so that I owe them more, so that, you know, my bankruptcy can sit there and just, you know, really go through, make my liquid assets illiquid. That way I can piss it all away. What do we got?
Alex, today we have the Pounding Fathers.
Okay, so the Pounding Fathers, let me tell you this. You want to talk about big packages that come in small packages? These pills, very tiny, very potent though. And the Pounding Fathers, if you want to sit there and you want to get back into that mindset that made this country rise up, like in the musical Hamilton, and you want to know what it's like to have, yeah, it must be nice to have Washington on your side. And I'll tell you, this is how we make these pills. We have ransacked the graves of the Founding Fathers, and we have ground their bones into a fine, snortable powder that we then put into pill form. And you can take this, and I'll tell you, you can feel what it was like to be back there in the foundation of America, when things were pure, before we had all of this weird casting where you've got all these old white people played by urban actors. Yeah, I don't know. The songs are catchy. I'm just saying, you could have cast Tom Cruise. I don't understand why we're doing this Lin-Manuel Miranda person, whoever he is. But I'm telling you, you sit there, you can either take this pill, swallow it. Now when you drink something that's got to be old mead, you've got to sit there in order for this pill to be fully effective and imbibe you with the spirit of the Founding Fathers. You have to make homemade honey mead and drink it from a wooden cask in order for this pill to take effect, or you can chop it up and snort it through specifically a $2 bill. Otherwise, all bets are off. But I tell you, you follow those instructions and you will feel as hard as it was to sit there and wrest this country away from Britain. All right, next we got a widow wins the right to use dead husband's frozen sperm. She still needs okay of the hospital ethics committee. Now, I don't even get why this is a headline, because the whole thing is her dead husband's frozen sperm. Who else is that going to belong to? What, it was kids want it? Have you seen what it looks like in that jar? Have you seen his kids? They're not pretty, I'll tell you. I don't understand what this woman wants to do making more of these mongoloid demon babies. I tell you, they look like goblins. They look like demon goblins. They act like they're possessed. And hey, if she wants to sit there and get teen pregnant, I'm assuming she's probably under 25. I'm guessing she killed her husband. If she wants to get teen pregnant, I guess that's her call. All right, and lastly, tight end returns after colon surgery. Now, I'm not sure if that's accurate, because while that may be his position, I'm telling you, he's not a tight end anymore. And you can tell just by the fact that he had to go in for colon surgery. What's that all about? What's going on in his tight end is my question. And my thing is, I'm going to tell you, I think it's liberal elites. I think that this man has been seduced by the dark side of the government, and he has given in to his primal urges to bend over in front of other men and do stuff with their butts in the locker room. I'm not judging him. It's just not for me. And I'm going to tell you, if he needed that colon surgery, he is not returning as a tight end. I guarantee you he is now a wide receiver. Thank you.
God damn it. That was fucking perfect. You know what the really sad thing is? I am caffeinated, I'm sober, and I still didn't see that coming. Thank you very much for watching the New World Order broadcast. And just remember, we are watching you too.
Someone is watching. There are strangers.